Friday, April 5. Imagine the changes that occurred in the life of Christ's disciples as they spent time with him. They were mostly uneducated, simple people, accustomed to the teachings and traditions of their Jewish faith. But now they were challenged by the Galilean rabbi. They experienced jealousy, as we read in Matthew chapter 20, verses 20 to 24. Then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to him with her sons, kneeling down and asking something from him. And he said to her, "What do you wish?" She said to him, "Grant that these 2 sons of mine may sit one on your right hand and the other on the left, in your kingdom." But Jesus answered and said, "Do you not know what you ask? Are you able to drink the cup that I am about to drink, and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with?" And they said, "We are able." So he said to them, "You will indeed drink my cup and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with, but to sit on my right hand and on my left is not mine to give, but it is for those for whom it is prepared by my Father." And when the 10 heard it, they were greatly displeased with the 2 brothers. And conflict in John chapter 3, verse 25. Then there arose a dispute among some of John's disciples and the Jews about purification. They seemed to lack faith, as we read in Mark 9, 28 and 29. And when he had come into the house, his disciples asked him privately, "Why could we not cast it out?" So he said to them, "This kind can come out by nothing but prayer and fasting." And they even abandoned, as we read in Matthew 26 and verse 56. But all this was done that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled. Then all the disciples forsook him and fled. And they betrayed Jesus, as we read in Matthew 26, 69 to 74. Now Peter sat outside in the courtyard, and a servant girl came to him, saying, "You also were with Jesus of Galilee." But he denied it before them all, saying, "I do not know what you are saying." And when he had gone out to the gateway, another girl saw him and said to those who were there, "This fellow also was with Jesus of Nazareth." But again he denied with an oath, "I do not know the man." And a little later, those who stood by came up and said to Peter, "Surely you also are one of them, for your speech betrays you." Then he began to curse and swear, saying, "I do not know the man." At the same time, they were growing spiritually, so that people recognized Peter had been with Jesus, as we've just read in verse 73. And a little later, those who stood by came up and said to Peter, "Surely you also are one of them, for your speech betrays you." And even the members of the Sanhedrin marvelled when they perceived that Peter and John were uneducated and untrained men. They realized that they had been with Jesus, as it says in Acts 4:13. Think, too, about the incredibly positive impact we could have in our families if we lived in such a way that when other members of our family see us, they know that we have been with Jesus. What do these words from Ellen White have to say about influences in the home? And this is a quote from Adventist Home, page 18. "The home may be plain, but it can also be a place where cheerful words are spoken and kindly deeds are done, where courtesy and love are abiding guests." And that brings us to our discussion questions for this week. There are 3. The first says, read Ecclesiastes 3, 1-8. What are these verses saying, and how can you apply the principle there to your own life and experiences? Ecclesiastes 3, verses 1-8. "To everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to gain and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace. And question 2. In class, talk about some of the life-changing experiences that you have been through, and talk about the lessons you learned and, if applicable, the lessons you should have learned. What did you learn from the lessons that you didn't know? Also, talk about how these life-changing experiences impacted your family. What lessons did you learn in these situations too? And 3, what are the ways you live today that, were it not for Christ in your life, would be radically different from what they are now? What should that tell you about the power of Christ to change us? You have been listening to a reading of the Adult Sabbath School Bible Study Guide by Dr. Percy Harold from Queensland, Australia. This service is brought to you by Hope Channel, the Sabbath School Department, and Christian Services for the Blind. Remember, God is always faithful.